Qingdao Declaration, signed at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Qingdao Summit, has set guidelines and priorities for development in the coming years. Beyond continuing to combat terrorism, extremism and separatism, the SCO is extending to boost economic coordination and integration among the world's largest country, the world's largest manufacturing nation, an area with huge gas and oil resources, and the world's two most populous countries, all part of the group. So how should we evaluate the SCO's expanding role? How will challenges be overcome and goals reached with multilateral cooperation? And what can we expect from the expanding SCO in regional and global governance? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. B.R. Deepak, Professor of Chinese Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pandong. So, gentlemen, let's start with the centerpiece of the achievement of the 18th SCO Summit in the eastern Chinese city of Qingdao. That is the Qingdao Declaration. What do you think is the key message from this document, Mr.
I think the key message definitely is the continued, sort of a pledge or commitment to the Shanghai spirit, which has been guiding and the cooperation and the development of Shanghai, of this regional organization in the years to come and in the days and the years to in the future.
What do you think is the core values of the Shanghai spirit?
I think the Shanghai spirit, in Chinese, it's 20 characters. But for me, the most important thing is the word like trust, mutual benefit, and equality. And more importantly, respect for the diversity of culture and commonly strive for the common prosperity or development. So all these words put in together, making a kind of making the organization unique and different from other regional organizations in traditional sense.
And Professor, what's the key message you're getting from Qingdao Declaration?
I believe it is an all-round comprehensive cooperation in the field of traditional and non-traditional security, especially counter-terrorism, energy security, connectivity, and economic integration, especially the regional economic integration across Eurasia, and at the same time to do away with the governance deficit or governance dilemma which the world and the region is facing at this point in time.
And actually, your country, India, is participating this time's summit for the first time as a full member of the SCO. And in his speech to the summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi touched upon the issue of Afghanistan in terms of security, and Pakistan's president also touched upon this topic, the security in Afghanistan. But it seems that the two countries have adopted different approaches. So do you think the SCO platform could provide more room for coordination for the two countries on this particular issue, and maybe for more room for the two countries to engage each other, considering their historical...
Yeah, precisely. I think it provides an excellent platform. Maybe this is just the beginning of India and Pakistan being present as full members in SCO, and they are just trying to come to terms because the bilateral dialogue is still stalled, it's not heading in any direction. But if we see the kind of opportunities Shanghai Cooperation Organization has provided, I may point to this SCO RAT legal expert meeting held in last month in Islamabad, where both the countries participated. So I think this is just beginning, which provided a sort of like platform for communication between two countries, and they will understand each other's concerns in a better way. And I think Afghanistan is one of the points where the differences are huge because of the security dilemmas. I think I would also like to mention President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi's unofficial summit in Wuhan, where both the leaders agreed that there would be cooperation as far as security and economic construction of Afghanistan is concerned. So I think, yes, maybe in the coming years there are going to be more coordinated approaches as far as the issues of common concerns are there.
When we talk about Afghanistan, we have to talk about security. Security is exactly where the SCO started as an organization. Mr. Rohn, earlier some Chinese diplomats are saying that in the Afghanistan issue, there could be an SCO model. Tell us more about this new approach to deal with regional security challenges.
Indeed, I think SCO was originated, developed from a kind of border talks mechanism, and then between China and the former Soviet Union, including Russia. Russia, and later on developed. That's why we got the name, and that's named after Shanghai. In the process of the development, and I think there have been the organization has been developed made a contribution in terms of how to manage security. For example, the new security concept or new security outlook, featuring common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. And looking at the region, there are many security challenges, both traditional and non-traditional. But I think the non-traditional security issues or threats are more grave, if I can say. So so-called three evil forces and the transboundary crimes. And also I think in recent years the organization has taken notice the threat of cybersecurity and so on and so forth. But regional hotspot issues like Afghanistan remains an issue, security issue that has to be dealt with. I think if you look at the history of the trajectory of the development of SCO, you would find that SCO has always played a very important and positive role in managing the Afghan issues. They have a mechanism they call the SCO Afghanistan Contact Group, bringing together all the stakeholders. And I believe that with now the two important players or stakeholders of the issues, which are India and Pakistan, and I believe that now the organization as a whole would have more sort of leverages and would play a more important role in helping find a way to address the security threat or the issues of Afghanistan. But of course, this issue is very much complicated, and they would also need support and understanding of other stakeholders, which I think are equally important.
In his keynote speech to the SCO Summit, President Xi Jinping that talking about the concept of security, the SCO should seek security for all rather than the old concept of so-called absolute security for one single country. What do you make of this notion?
Yeah, I think that's how it is different from other groupings, say for example NATO, which essentially is a military alliance, and it is exclusive group of a few people. And take, for example, G7, which is an economic grouping of the rich nation. It is, again, exclusive, But as far as Shanghai Cooperation Organization is concerned, it is a non-military bloc. It is not directed against any country. And as far as the security issues are concerned, so they are inclusive, and it is taken under the ambit of Shanghai spirit. So I think when we talk about security, which is common security, comprehensive and cooperative sustainable security, so it is under the ambit of Shanghai spirit, and where the participant countries or the member states, so they have equal stakes in it. It is inclusive, and it integrates various facets of security within the member states.
Just as you mentioned, the SCO is non-alignment, non-confrontational, and it's not targeting any third country. And in his keynote speech, President Xi Jinping said the SCO mechanism is a major innovation in theory and practice. of international relations. What do you make of this, Mr. Rao?
Yeah, it is true. I think if you look at compared SCO and with other regional or international organizations with similar functions, you would find that it's unique in the sense that all the members are equals. They reach agreement through consensus based on equal sort of footings, and more importantly, I think during the process, I think mutual trust has been built. So, and I think the other thing is that the three no's is also very important. That is, not meant to forge a kind of alliance, not meant to targeting the third countries or the other parties. And the last but not least, I think they have two very important sort of, if I can say, pillars. One is that, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has always been the guiding principle to provide the guidance, but also have the kind of long-term friendship treaty, and which brings these members, I think, through legal means. So all in all, I think this is a new regional groupings, only 70 years old. Of course, we're talking about now coming to the age. Compared to the other regional organizations, or ones it's not so new, so old, and it is developing. So I think it's a very promising regional organization with great potential in addressing the issues. Particularly, I think we are talking about security issues in the region.
It's turbulent time for global governance as well. The old is not fitting for the trend of history right now, while new mechanisms and paradigms are emerging. In his keynote speech, President Xi Jinping mentioned some outdated concepts. For example, clashes of civilizations, Cold War mentality, and zero-sum game theory. What do you make of this judgment?
Yeah, precisely. I think President Xi is very right when he mentioned that these, certain political approaches emanating from certain countries. Not only these, but also I would add, a few more. For example, unilateralism, or you can say unipolarity under sort of like multipolar system, which I will say that the Americans would tend to call it unipolar, multipolar world. As it is reflected in NATO, or as it is reflected in G7, and protectionism, of course, populism, nativism, so on and so forth. I think these political approaches emanating from certain countries, so they have disrupted the present international security and economic architecture. And that is why I think a new approach, new paradigm, so which is provided by Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is extremely important. I think it is in this context when we say that these outdated approaches like zero-sum games and the Cold War mentality, they are really, really outdated concept, and we have entered the 21st century long back. And I think as President Xi Jinping, so he quoted from Mencius when he mentioned that if you climb Taishan and then you see the whole world. So I think we need to have that kind of approach to stand on the balcony and see the macroscopic picture of the world and the trend where we are heading towards.
Well, gentlemen, we'll continue this after a short break. You're watching Dialogue on CGTN. Stay with us. So, gentlemen, as you just mentioned, the SCO has been developing fast in the past 17 years, and its core mission has been evolved from a focus solely on security to economic development and regional trust building. So, talking about economic development, some experts are saying that a synergy is being built up between the SCO as a political framework and BRI as a development initiative. What do you make of this?
It is true. I think if you look at again, SCO, I think security aspect and the security dimension has been much more developed or established in terms of think new ideas, new concepts and others. And it also been, I think, working very well in terms of addressing the security challenges, traditional and non-traditional ones. But unfortunately, I think the economic dimension or economic question always remain behind. And this is partly because of the region. I think the members, there are huge disparities in terms of size, in terms of economic structure, and also because I think in terms of their sort of priorities of economic cooperation, both at home and abroad. If you look at China, look at others, they either more or less in the past. I mean, it remains, I guess, oriented towards the developed Western countries. So how to make sure that within the group, the intra-regional, cooperation among them is always been an issue. And look at other similar regional organizations, SARC and others, and even in the Eurasia, Eurasia sort of economic union, which literally was Russia and its former Soviet member, the trade issue remains lagging behind. So how to address this issue? I think this is an issue. This is really a challenge. But so far, I think they are picking up very fast, and this summit meeting, I noticed that there are some big progress making like that. Certainly in terms of the agreement, I heard that the trade facilitation agreement, and most importantly, it seems that now they have found a new way to address this, is how to make sure they find more and better synergy between the BRI initiative and aspirations and the needs of the member countries in general and the region as a whole. So I thought that this is a very important progress and a very promising sort of work that is going to be done.
Since you've mentioned the agreements signed this time, we could see that there are agreements about big picture, for example, the Qingdao Declaration, and there are also agreements on specific areas, for example, the trade facilitation agreement you just mentioned, and also there are agreements on epidemic prevention, and also on food security, on youth exchanges, and even on environmental protection. So by doing this together as a united organization, do you think the SCO is now trying to deal with the root cause of security, that is poverty and underdevelopment, Professor?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the security boundary of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it has sprawled into various domains. It is not a pure security umbrella now for the member states, and which is very, very pertinent to sprawl in other areas, because after all, to resolve the problems of food security, and I may refer to President Xi Jinping's one statement last year that the Chinese dreams, it need to be connected to the aspirations of for good life of the other countries, neighboring countries. So, and in this context, various initiatives, including the BRI, which we have been talking about. So they act as a vehicle, to implement these visions, of the leaders. And I think it has gained quite a support, from all the member states. Including India, I think this time, if I may refer to Prime Minister Modi's recent speech in Qingdao, he has said that we are supportive of this initiative, the connectivity initiative. In fact, it is the connectivity which will solve the various problems of the landlocked country and bring prosperity, uplift people from the poverty, especially in the landlocked country. And China's experience, I think, in this field, would come quite handy, because China has benefited from this initiative, from globalization, and elevated, almost 700 million people from poverty line, and that's what the countries in the regions they are looking towards China experience and to benefit from it. And I think food security, poverty, and even environmental protection, so they are interrelated as far as the overall dynamics of Shanghai Cooperation Organization is concerned.
Right. You just mentioned that India has changed stance towards China's Belt and Road Initiative. We know that an election in India is coming up within less than a year's time, and also geopolitics sometimes could be pressing for India. Do you think that stance will change again?
I don't know at this point in time. Anything can happen because India is a very, very different country, where the agendas, especially during the election time, so they tend to change drastically. But I think as far as my stand as an academician is concerned, India has always stood for connectivity, because India has initiated its own connectivity programs, whether they are in Southeast Asia, whether they are in South Asia, or even linking India to Central Asia, this north-south transportation corridor. So I think the approach is how do we align these developmental strategies and the proliferation of these connectivity initiatives. If they could be aligned, if they could be docked with each other, I think the building of community of shared future could be realized in a better way.
Besides physical connectivity, we also have to talk about connectivity of policies, and that's all about political trust. What role can the SCO play among its members in this regard? But after all, member countries are at different stages of development and they have different political systems.
Yeah, of course, the most important thing is we have to respect the system that and the internal affairs of a sovereign state or the all member state. This is very important. This is actually enshrined, embodied in the SCO spirit. But more importantly, I think the countries themselves and all the members are working together to formulate a kind of a common development strategy that would give full play their respected advantages. For example, you talked about some of the members are rich in natural resources, gas and oil, and some of the countries are more advanced in manufacturing sectors, and the others, I think they have advantages of human resources and so on and so forth. So with that understanding and with that trust and all these advantages would be given full play so that they can mutually complement each other. And last but not least, I think is that the trust is there. So I think that this summit has reached made great progress by reaching agreement, but I think I also had to mention that they also had to set out the future plan, which is, I think, in the next 5 years. This is, again, I think the contribution for me is made by China as the chair.
Talking about future plan, let's talk about trade, Professor. At this year's summit, I heard several leaders mentioning this word, Eurasia. And many countries are trying to build, as you just mentioned, the Eurasian economic development zones and initiatives, and maybe a Eurasian land bridge, well connected to regional countries and can be extended even to the subcontinent. So there's an old saying that for the past 500 years, trade mainly took place on high seas, but maybe for the near future, trade could take place on this huge Eurasian continent. What do you think is the potential there, Professor?
Yes, potential is huge. If you look, have a little peep in the history, we will see that most of the trade, say before the advent of the Europeans, to this part of the world, so it was primarily through Eurasian continent, and India and China, so they contributed almost 50% of the world GDP. So there is a potential, and even now, if you see the trade structure and trade volume within the SCO member states, though it is insignificant, given the size and population, geographical mass, but $217 billion US, and India and China recently, so they have declared in Qingdao that this trade volume would be taken to $100 billion within 2 years. That is by 2020. So potential is huge, and investment is huge, and Xi Jinping declaring 30 billion RMB, for the interbank consortium, is another incentive for this country. So I think it remains one of the most dynamic region which connects, various land masses, whether it is Southeast Asia, whether it is South Asia or Eurasia. So the potential is huge. So I think, futuristically speaking, we would be, turning it to a supercontinent if we really, implement the policy goals which have been defined or enshrined in Shanghai Cooperation Organization Charter through Shanghai's spirit. I think there is potential, and the potential is very, very huge. And complementarities between these countries. For example, India is an energy deficit country, and China's northwest region, especially Xinjiang, in the future becoming this hub for energy cooperation between Central Asian republics.
And it is happening
Russia.
right now. For example, the Hormuz dry port between at China's border with Kazakhstan, right?
Yes. There are various interconnectivity initiatives being carried out, whether they are in the road and transport, railways or gas pipelines. And I think if these emanates, these hubs, so they are linked together and sprawled in various directions, I think there is a huge potential, to turn this continent, Eurasia, as a supercontinent.
And Mr. nearly all the leaders at this time's summit in Qingdao have mentioned the importance of people-to-people exchanges as well. Why it's so important in future development? Because it sounds like a relatively softer side of
well, it is soft, certainly, but it's very important, at least equal importance to the previous two pillars, the security and economic trade, because it's a very interesting fact that in some sense they are very close neighbors, but you would find that they know little, or they don't know each other very well. It is partly because of the cultural differences, but more importantly, for me, it is because lack of interaction. So you look at the numbers of mutual visits. If we're talking about China and Japan, we're talking about each year.
More cultural exchanges and mutual understanding.
That's right. So that would
constitute
exactly.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pan Dong in Beijing. Bye-bye.